She shattered records at the Oscars, then vanished without a trace. Luise Rainer was the first person in history to win 2 Academy Awards back-to-back. Hollywood worshipped her. MGM paraded her like a queen. The press called her a living legend. But just months after her second win, she disappeared. No scandals, no tabloid meltdowns, no final performance. She simply walked away. It was the kind of vanishing act that Hollywood never forgives and never forgets. For decades, people whispered theories. Was she blacklisted, broken, or was she silenced? What really happened to the woman who conquered Hollywood and then chose to burn it all down? This isn't just a story about success. It's about the cost of brilliance in a town that destroys what it cannot control. And the deeper you look into Luise Rainer's story, the darker it gets. Luise Rainer was born in Düsseldorf, Germany, in 1910, into a world already trembling beneath the weight of war. Her father was a successful businessman, cold and demanding. Her mother, gentle but distant. From a young age, Luise was caught between expectations she couldn't fulfill and emotions she wasn't allowed to express. She grew up across Europe, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, never staying in one place for long. It gave her languages, yes, but also loneliness. "I was always the outsider," she would later say, always watching. What saved her was the theater. At 16, she discovered the stage in Vienna and felt, for the first time, that she could breathe. She trained under Max Reinhardt, one of the greatest directors of the era, known for his emotional intensity and strict discipline. Luise thrived in that pressure. She didn't just act, she became. Every role was a transformation, every performance, a way to disappear into someone else. But even then, she wasn't chasing fame. She once said, "I never wanted to be a star. I wanted to be an artist." Her talent didn't go unnoticed. MGM scouts spotted her during a German film and offered her a contract in Hollywood. She was barely in her 20s. She didn't speak English fluently, but she said yes. She was running toward a dream without knowing she was stepping into a cage. When Luise Rainer arrived in Hollywood in the mid-1932nd, she didn't fit the mold. She wasn't a blonde bombshell or a wide-eyed ingnu. She was intense, enigmatic, and deeply European. And yet, within a year, she became one of the most talked-about women in the industry. Her first few roles at MGM were modest, but studio executives saw something special in her, a haunting fragility, a quiet power. Then came The Great Ziegfeld, 1936. Rainer's performance as Anna Held, the flamboyant yet tragic wife of Florenz Ziegfeld, stunned audiences. She had just one emotional telephone scene, less than 3 minutes of screen time, but it won her the Academy Award for Best Actress. Suddenly, she was everywhere. Headlines called her the next Garbo. MGM crowned her their latest star. Louis B. Mayer himself took personal interest in her career. Hollywood was captivated by her mystery. But it wasn't a fluke. The very next year, Rainer starred in The Good Earth, 1937, a role that required her to play a Chinese peasant woman with quiet strength and heartbreak. The role was demanding, uncomfortable, and far removed from Hollywood glamour, but she delivered something unforgettable. And again, she won. 2 Oscars, back-to-back, a record at the time. Luise Rainer became the first true Oscar darling. But behind the scenes, something was already shifting. She began resisting the roles. She was being offered cookie-cutter parts that lacked depth or meaning. She fought with executives. She challenged scripts. She said no more than they liked. To them, she was becoming difficult. To Luise, she was protecting her soul. Luise Rainer thought she had earned the right to choose. But in 1932nd Hollywood, especially under the iron grip of MGM, actresses didn't get to choose. They obeyed. After her second Oscar, Rainer became increasingly disillusioned. She was offered shallow scripts, romantic clichés, and roles that asked her to smile, never to think. She pushed back, asking for real characters, real stories. Studio heads grew impatient. Mayer, once her greatest advocate, now called her difficult. Behind closed doors, she was labeled uncooperative, temperamental, even unstable, and the press followed suit. Once the darling of the tabloids, she was now painted as moody, cold, too European for American tastes. Rumors swirled that she was arrogant, uncontrollable, that she didn't appreciate the fame she was given. But what no one seemed to understand was that Luise never wanted fame. She wanted truth. And truth didn't sell movie tickets. As roles dried up, her mental state deteriorated. Isolated and frustrated, she fell into what she later called a deep sadness. She no longer recognized the person she was becoming. The world saw a glamorous actress with 2 Oscars. She saw a puppet trapped in a system that didn't care who she really was. In interviews years later, she would say, "I was made into a machine, and I walked away before they could destroy me." And so, just like that, Hollywood's brightest star disappeared. No final film, no farewell statement. She simply vanished, leaving behind confusion, whispers, and a question no one could answer. Why would someone at the peak of their power choose to vanish? She didn't make a public announcement. She didn't write a memoir. She just left. By the end of the 1932nd, Luise Rainer had packed her bags and walked away from Hollywood without a second glance. She moved back to Europe, first Switzerland, then London. She left behind her career, her fame, even her Oscars. For years, she refused to talk about her time in the industry. She was done. At a time when most actors would fight tooth and nail to stay in the spotlight, Luise disappeared by choice. And for decades, no one asked where she went. There were no paparazzi chasing her, no desperate attempts at a comeback, no interviews on late-night television, just silence. She spent most of her adult life living in quiet apartments, reading philosophy, writing poetry, and traveling the world alone. Friends say she never spoke about Hollywood unless asked, and even then, her eyes would darken. In her later years, she would return briefly to the screen, small roles, cameo appearances, but the magic was gone. Not from her, but from the world around her. She had seen too much to believe in the dream again. She died in London in 2014, just days before her 105th birthday. The headlines were respectful. They called her the forgotten Oscar Queen, the legend who vanished. But they didn't really understand her, because Luise Rainer didn't fade away. She escaped. In the long and glittering history of Hollywood, Luise Rainer remains an enigma, a name whispered in film schools, a face frozen in black and white stills, the first woman to win 2 Oscars in a row, and the first to reject what they stood for. Her decision to walk away was seen, at the time, as madness. But today, it feels like rebellion, a woman who refused to be molded, who would rather be forgotten than be fake. She once said, "Fame is hollow. It gives you nothing real, nothing that lasts." And yet, what she left behind does last. Luise Rainer inspired generations of actresses who came after her, women who dared to challenge the system, to say no, to demand more. Not all of them disappeared, but all of them, in some way, owed something to her silence. Her legacy isn't measured in box office numbers or red carpet appearances. It's measured in courage. Maybe we didn't understand her in her time. Maybe we still don't. But one thing is certain, Luise Rainer didn't vanish. She made a choice. And in doing so, she left behind something Hollywood couldn't market, but desperately needed: integrity.